My goal with this hive today is to decide, is it time to harvest honey or not? And I have not looked at this hive since, well, really since we looked at it last month. And so I'm going to try to see, okay, are we ready to harvest honey? Now there's a variety of signs I look for when I'm trying to decide if it's time to harvest. One big one is just, what are the flowers blooming? So as you've been keeping bees for a while, and as you talk to other beekeepers in your local area, you will begin to learn what flowers in your area are indicative of the major honey flow starting. And when those flowers stop blooming, pretty good sign that the flow is usually over. Major honey flows usually follow a relatively stable pattern as well as far as dates. You know, where I live in North Texas, you know, I'm watching for the Gaillardia or the Indian blanket, and I'm watching for the Scabiosa. And when those two start blooming, I know the major flow is beginning. When those are largely burned up and dried up, which is usually the last week of June, the first week of July, which is where we are now, I know the honey flow is about over. So that's one way to tell what's going on. The other is, of course, to look at your bees. And there is no substitute for just looking at your bees. And so I look at what's going on in the honey supers. And so here we've got, you know, this frame that we can see the bees are starting to cap the honey. They haven't fully capped it yet, but they are beginning to cap it. One interesting thing I watch out for is, and I don't see it on this frame, but it's something I like to pay attention to and watch out for, is if I start seeing areas where the bees have started eating the nectar instead of storing it in the frame. So if I start seeing bald, bare patches where the bees have eaten the nectar back out of the frames, then I'm a little bit concerned, because that tells me that instead of bringing a bunch of nectar in, the bees are now reversing and starting to eat that nectar out of the hive. And so that's a sign too that, hey, if you better get it harvested before the bees start eating all of it. Now so I also am going to do a shake test, and I'm still getting some drips of honey out of these frames. So, you know, I would say that this isn't quite ready to harvest yet. And that's fairly consistent with the flowers that I'm seeing bloom as well. Even though it's been incredibly hot in Texas, I am still seeing Scabiosa and Indian blanket hanging on because we have gotten really good rains. So we've gotten great rain. It's hot, but those flowers are still holding on. That being said, most beekeepers can, you know, in Texas can harvest around the 4th of July pretty safely, you know, without the honey being too high of a moisture. But you know, if all the hives look like this and I can shake those upper frames and still get some decent nectar raining out of them, you know, I'll probably give it another week or so and then plan on harvesting in about a week. But our next box here, you know, very similar. We've got some capped honey in this deep box, but they are still working on capping. But this bottom box, this bottom honey super is much more filled out. You can see they've got most of the capping work done. So another week isn't going to hurt anything to let this hive sit before we harvest the honey.